we are looking at How to Be a Man 101. And ladies, if you're listening, don't tune out because these are the things that you should be looking for in a man.
The following is a presentation of Christian Fellowship Church, a discipleship-focused community in Los Lunas, New Mexico. Join us Sundays at 10 a.m. and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. as we preach through the Bible, line by line.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Drive Bible Podcast. Joining me today, the one and only legendary Bob Huffman, the driving force behind the show, if you will. And again, this is a collaborative effort between Iron Lotus Martial Arts, the world leader in discipleship-focused martial arts programs, and Christian Fellowship Church here in beautiful Los Lunas, New Mexico.
Yeah.
I'm Pastor Spencer, the host. And today we're going to be looking at Jesus as the example of what biblical manhood looks like. And we see this very clearly in Philippians 2, so I'll go ahead and read those verses for us here. Philippians 2, 5 through 8 says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant and coming in the likeness of men. And being found in the appearance as man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross." So there's a lot of beautiful things in here that we can pontificate on for months. You know,
Yes.
you've got servanthood in the bondservant role. You've got humility, humbling himself, and humbling himself even to the point of death. And, you know, I love the fact that love is sacrifice, and sacrifice always includes death. Something must die. And so to truly love something, you have to truly kill a part of yourself to truly love something. And Jesus becomes the example of how that works, not just spiritually, but physically.
Yes.
And so what does this look like when you read these, just these first three verses that we're going to get into here? What does that look like to you? What does that speak to you as Jesus as our example?
So the mind of Christ being in the form of God is, I think, what we see here in these passages. So if we consider that, then I think the divine nature of Christ is really spoken to from God,
Right.
right? And so I think if we look to Zechariah chapter 12, verses 10, we read this, "And I will pour on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and supplication. Then they will look to me whom they pierced. Yes, they will mourn for him as one mourns for his only son, and grieve for him as one grieves for a firstborn." And I think the him here is referring to Christ.
Right.
So right here we see this suggestion that there's a divine being we're talking about, God and Christ together, right?
Right.
And that's an Old Testament look at it. And if we look to the New Testament, if we go all the way to Revelations chapter 1, verse 7, we see this: "Behold, he is coming with clouds, and every eye will see him, even they who pierced him, and all the tribes of the earth will mourn because of him. Even so, amen." So we can have no doubt then that the deity of Christ in this,
Right.
It's obvious. And Scripture declares that we must imitate using him or Jesus as an example given to us in our focus today in the three verses of Philippians 2, verses 5 through 8. So,
Right. So I think when I really start digging into it, we have the example of Christ. And I think Paul even says, "Follow me as I follow Christ." If I stop following Christ, stop following me. It's basically the implied task there. And so we have to look at Jesus as not just a good teacher, not just a moral man, but also the example of what it means to live a manly life,
Right.
A masculine life.
Right.
You have today's world is screaming toxic masculinity, toxic masculinity. But we're going to evaluate a little bit today on what is toxic masculinity. And unfortunately, it's being pointed at the Christian men, or quote-unquote toxic masculinity.
Right.
But we're going to start digging into this. Now, the world's understanding of masculinity, or what we would call toxic masculinity, is in fact a lack of true masculinity.
Right.
Okay. So the secular concept, is a corruption of the design that God had for us, right? So if Adam was supposed to be the perfect man, or the first man, and he was perfect up until the point of sin, and then you have Jesus who comes in as the second Adam, the second way, or the second thing that we need to follow to be masculine, to be the replacement of an imperfect with a perfect, speaking again to the divinity of Christ, but also the example that we followed. Well, when we follow the example of Christ, we step into true masculinity. Yes. And that's something that the world today, the secular world, is really opposed to. And so what is toxic masculinity? Vodi Bakum actually puts it this way, and he has a very, very beautiful parallel here, and he calls it the 3 Bs. Okay. Yeah. So one is the ball field, or you could say the battlefield, my version of it, right? The ball field, where a man's worth is measured by his athletic performance, or his, we'll say, job ability, okay? So then you have the second B, which is the bedroom, where a man's worth is defined by his conquest, his partners, his prowess, all those things that are in the bedroom conversation, right? To put it, delicately. And then the third B is the billfold. How much money is that person making? So man's worth is measured by financial power. And so those are the things that actually, if you look at every false religion in the world, those are the 3 same things: money, power, and sex. So that's it. Every false religion is bent on these things. The world's idea of what makes a man a man is bent on these same 3 things: money, power, and sex. And, you've got money, you've got power, you've got all the things been in there. So what is biblical masculinity as opposed to that? So if toxic masculinity says I'm serving myself and I'm gaining power and I'm controlling things, biblical masculinity then says it's self-sacrificial love. And you can even look at that in the marriage dynamic. Husbands are to love their wives as Christ loved the church, to give themselves for her. So there's the sacrificial element here. Right. Okay. So that's Ephesians 5:25. Okay. Again, you have toxic masculinity, full of pride, full of ego. It's driven by the need to be on top of everything and to be the alpha. And often you see this masking fear with swagger. So I've got to have the right clothing, I've got to have the right look, I've got to have the right image, but really I'm afraid that people will see who I really am on the inside. So I'm masking all these things. And then when you flip that back, you've got biblical masculinity, which is humility and meekness. And this follows Christ's example that we see here, that he's not only washing the disciples' feet as a beautiful example of that, but what did he say? Being equal to God, he didn't think it was something that he could take or should take. He showed up on the earth and he had all the power in the world just to go, you know what? I'm going to snap and we're going to start this whole thing all over again. But instead he said, let me be intimately involved with the human expression and understand it fully and live it and serve it. I think one of the things I put on the study guide this week is that he stepped into and submitted to the authorities that he created. Right. That's a crazy thought process. Right. So again, let's look at another toxic trait here is what we see this in the world. Intimidation and exploitation, to use my strength to surpass and silence and exploit the vulnerable. We see this in what we would call toxic masculinity, but the world would just say that that's just being a man.
Unfortunately, yeah.
But then you look at biblical masculinity, and it's servant leadership, leading by serving others and protecting the weak. My job as a leader is to make sure that my junior instructors or whoever I might be leading in this case, from the martial arts standpoint, the junior instructors, that they have every tool they need to be successful. I'm to serve them and to put them on a platform where they can thrive and they can succeed. And that's servant leadership.
Yes.
Fortune 500 companies are getting on board with that. Believe it or not, the Army, towards the end of my tenure there, was starting to come around to this servant leadership idea, where the sergeants first class, the platoon sergeants, would be taking a step into and mentoring rather than commanding, and to give the staff sergeants, their squad leaders, the opportunities to lead and fail by servanthood. Phenomenal. Again, we've got another toxic trait here that we want to discuss: emotional detachment, where I'm repressing compassion and emotional depth, viewing it as a weakness. And when you don't have emotional attachment, when you're not engaged with emotions, you're keeping everybody at arm's length. You have no true relationship with anybody. And when I view that as weakness, oh, real men don't cry. How many people heard that growing up? When I do that, I'm distancing myself from everybody.
Yeah, that's a part of that hiding in the costume you talked about earlier.
Yeah, it's part of that masking. It's part of the costume. Flipping back, you've got the biblical masculinity portion of that, which is empathy and emotional wisdom. Emotional intelligence is super important, okay? And that's the secular word for it, but the biblical term that I want to use here is emotional wisdom. And it shows empathy and emotionally connectivity without being ruled by emotions, without being emotionally detached, and without being controlled by it. So how do I do that? That's wisdom. I have to understand the balance of it. It's not simply, I'm in touch with my feelings and I'm running around being emotional all day. I've been accused of wearing my feelings on my sleeves, and that's fine. The shoe fits. But am I being controlled by them? Am I a rage monster? Am I hulking out constantly? No. You have to have the balance of knowing when to feel and when to show empathy and when to be strong.
Sure.
And that's the wisdom aspect of it. Again, toxicity comes with dominance and aggression and a self-focused, a self-interested intent. Biblical masculinity focuses on the truth of God's word and the truth of God's justice. And so we're going to unpack this in much greater detail when we come back from the break here in a minute, but wanted to just drive into this concept as we start digging into it and start thinking about, what does it mean to be a man? What is the world's definition of being a man? And really, if you've got a notepad out, I would challenge you, just write down, what is it in your opinion to be a man? And then does that line up with the example of what Christ has given us in biblical manhood? So when we come back, we're going to drive deeper into the scripture of what makes all of those biblical masculinity traits tick, and how do we apply them to our lives. We'll be right back. Hey guys, Pastor Spencer here, the founder of Iron Lotus Martial Arts, the world leader in discipleship-focused martial arts. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, Christianity, karate, how do these two things coincide? And so we first need to establish what Christian karate, or at least our version of Christian karate, Shinja Kempo karate, is not. Shinja Kempo karate is not simply a technique or a punch or a kick or a kata with a Bible verse just slapped on top of it. From the ground up, we are a discipleship-focused journey. Each step along this journey represents a new path in spiritual growth, as each belt rank represents its own doctrine that we drive the students deeper into and interact with on an intellectual level. At the heart of Iron Lotus Martial Arts, we are building and developing warriors, not just in the physical sense, but in the spiritual sense, as we are developing warriors for Christ.
Iron Lotus Martial Arts, where faith and discipline meet. Join us on the journey.
Hey guys, welcome back to The Drive. We are digging deep into the concept of what is biblical masculinity. And it's not the bravado of men. It's not being the most manliest of men by the world's standards, but it comes down to servant leadership. Yeah. It comes down to following the example that Christ gave us. It comes down to sacrifice. It comes down to all these things. But we're going to turn the page back a little bit as we dive directly into this thing. And we're looking at Genesis 2, And Adam was commanded to tend and keep the garden in Genesis 2:15.
Right.
I'll let you guys turn to that. But the words here, tend, abad, and to keep, shamer, means to serve, cultivate, and and it's an active, constructive mandate. Okay,
Yeah.
so to create, to build, to make things productive. That's what to tend means. Now, to keep means to guard and protect and to watch over. So those are the root words that we're looking at there. So true masculinity, okay, and I'm going to write a blog article on this, and we're going to put this on the website as well here. But true masculinity comes down to the glad assumption of this responsibility. So what is being a man all about? Key phrase, if you take nothing else home, responsibility.
Yeah.
And we live in a world right now that denies all responsibility for all things. We just, and I'm going to blame Jeffrey the Giraffe for a moment for those of you guys that remember Toys R Us. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. And that was the generation that I was raised in, and it was the constant themes of Neverland and never growing up and always play and never work. And now we have a generation of parents, my generation, many of them are parents, and they are now teaching and trying to mentor kids, but they never learned how to grow up themselves. So they never took responsibility. So strength and self-control comes into an aspect of responsibility.
Right.
So true masculine strength is not a toxic aggression. It's not how much you can bench press. It's not flexing on your friends because you got one up on whatever it was on the ball field example, right? But instead, it's a level of self-control. So strength should be viewed from a biblical lens of self-control. If I can bench press 400 pounds, which I cannot, okay, I'll get there someday maybe, I don't know. But if I can bench press 400 pounds, okay, but I don't have the self-control to keep myself from sin, I am in fact weak. I'm weak in spirit. And Jesus was the example of strength in spirit, even though he wanted to step away from the cross and say, Lord, Father, if there's another way, let this cup pass before me.
Yeah.
And there was not. So he manned up, okay, and he went into it because there was no other way. And then it comes down to forgiveness. And it takes a power held in check. And that's really what self-control looks like. I want to take vengeance on the people who wrong me. But self-control says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And that's a beautiful thing that we should all focus on.
Right.
And again, in the Old Testament and the New Testament resonates this, is that vengeance belongs to the Lord.
Yeah.
If you truly serve a higher power, could God not punish the people that have wronged you better than what you have?
Yes, but as man, do you accept that all the time? No.
No, we should, but we don't. We don't. It's hard. It's way easier said than done. And that's why Jesus is Jesus, and we need Jesus.
Right.
The next step on the chopping block for us here is Jesus' example of leadership and humility. Men, point blank, you cannot escape this. Part of your responsibility as a man is to become a leader, and you will lead your household, and you will lead your ministry, which is first and foremost your household, and then into everything else is where you go, right? So you've got to lead, but you've got to lead through humility. You've got to lead through servanthood.
Right.
And again, you have the image of Jesus in John 13 washing the feet of the disciples.
Yes.
And that was a humiliating task, to put that into hermeneutical context. That was the task for the servants. The servants would come wash the feet. But here is Jesus coming to wash the feet. And if you remember, Peter's like, no, Lord, you're not going to wash my feet.
Right.
And I resonate with Peter so much. Because I'm like, Lord, you're not going to serve me. I'm going to serve you. And he says, if I don't serve you, you will have nothing to do with me. And he says, well, then wash all of me. You know?
Yeah.
And it's so funny how quickly Peter flips from like 0 to 100. then it's like, that's me, guys. If I can be transparent, that's me, you know? But you have the example of Jesus washing feet, and he's not afraid to humiliate himself in order to lead. Which, what does that mean to humiliate yourself in leadership? Is to take the heat when your subordinates mess something up. You're the one that's humiliated, and that's not a bad thing.
Right.
That means that you have room to grow, and you're humbly serving them, and you say, hey, I failed to get them the task or the tools that they needed for their task, and they failed it. That's on me. You know, they have the capability. I did not serve them. And humility constantly says others first. I love the example that Pastor Steve brought up, joy. Okay, Jesus is your example, and then others, and then myself last, or yourself last.
Right.
So what would Jesus do? Jesus is your example. Serve others, and then serve self last. So it was a really cool thing. So courage and sacrifice, we can get into that all day, about Jesus having the courage to go to the cross, but to truly sacrificially love somebody, right?
Yeah.
And that's challenging.
It is.
Emotional health and integrity. Guys, it's okay to cry. Shortest verse in the Bible, John 11:35. Jesus wept.
Yeah.
And he was not in a moment of weakness weeping for Lazarus, but he had compassion for the family. And it's okay to shed a tear.
Sure.
In fact, even in secular psychology, they're saying that the tears that you shed during moments of joy, the bio signature of it, like the makeup of it, the chemical makeup, that's what I was looking for, is totally different than tears that when you shed in sadness. And so when you have tears of joy, it's different than sadness, different than stress. And all these things put together are showing us the insight that your body is flushing out things that it needs to flush out in order to be healthy.
Right.
So when I'm sad, it's flushing out a chemical that I don't need in my body so that I can start striving to be happy again. And so that's just a really cool connection that, guys, you need to be in tune with your emotions. And it's going to sound like, oh, that sounds feminine. No, you need to be in tune with your emotions in a healthy way.
Right.
Proverbs 20 walks with integrity. Righteous man walks in his integrity. His children are blessed after him. And so Jesus stands as this example of integrity, the perfect archetype of masculinity. He alone fulfilled the divine mandate, the divine call to be a man.
Right.
So when you say, what is manhood? It's not how much you lift. It's not how good you are at karate.
Right.
Okay? It's not how good you are, in your academics or how smart you are. It's how much you serve. It's how much you serve.
Right.
How humble are you? How much are you following the example of Christ, even up to the point of death, obedient till death? To be a good leader, you have to be a good follower.
Right.
And you got to follow the commander's orders.
Absolutely. So I think being a believing Christian man means that the first thing is you must decide to be a man of God. Because without that, you'll never hope to accomplish any of what Spencer's spoken to so far today.
Right.
So God became man to dwell on the earth as Jesus Christ, the Messiah. Well, how cool is that? Right? So in his example, Christ fully displays the fruit of the Spirit. So I'd like to introduce that here for a bit, because the fruit of the Spirit is exactly what masculinity of men should be.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
if we look to Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, we find a description. It reads, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such there is no law." So this is the truest form of masculinity as far as I can tell, because it follows Christ's example, and that's just where we need to be in this masculine man.
Right. And if you look at that last one in verse 23, gentleness, self-control, the very last piece of that is self-control.
Yeah.
which was one of the very first pieces we talked about being a man. Your true strength is defined by how much control you have over your impulse versus, and I love the application there is, have you decided?
Yeah.
Have you decided to become a man of God?
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Right.
And that's the first step, if you will, in becoming biblically masculine. So, by living and bearing the fruit of the Spirit, a godly man can imitate Christ. We can see that in Philippians 2, verse 7, where it reads, "But made himself of no reputation, taking the form of a bondservant." And also verse 8, "He humbled himself and became obedient."
Right.
So these things point to that directly. And to me, it speaks to me this, that through this process, through being a bondservant and obedient, we can glorify God. And we do that because, in essence, we're magnifying the glory of Christ, right? In doing that. So if there's anything we could add to Christ, it's that we show his example in all that we do, right? And that just makes more glory for him, and that pleases God.
Right.
So,
and when you really look at it,
need to be.
When you really look at it, it's how do we glorify Christ with our behavior? We do that by imitating him.
Exactly right.
And so when we imitate the example that Jesus left for us, we end up with glorifying Christ. But that's the thing. And we said this last week, and it was kind of a bold statement, was if you're not imitating Christ, or you're not following and living for Christ enough, you're not going to have as many people coming out of the woodwork to hate you.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And it is a bold statement.
Yeah.
And that's not the goal, is to then be hated by the world around you. Like that's not that's not our goal. The goal is to imitate Christ.
Right.
Okay. So we'll clarify that. The goal is not to be hated, but to imitate Christ. But in doing so, the world is going to be opposed to what you're doing.
Yes.
Because as we already looked at, the secular world loves the concept of the 3 Bs: the bedroom, the billfold, and the ball field.
Yeah.
How good am I at doing manly things? Okay, how good am I at making money? How good am I at going on dates? To put it delicately, how many women have I dated? All these different things, and you're seeking value in the wrong things.
Yeah, well, the world celebrates those things, but the spiritual light does not.
Correct.
So,
and you've got to make
which are you going to stand for?
Yeah,
that's what the question is.
You've got to choose today.
Yeah,
you got to choose today what that's going to look like and what you're going to do with your life.
Right.
And are you going to choose to be a man of God, or are you going to choose to focus on the worldly things?
Right.
So we're going to look at this in an application when we come right back. Hey guys, welcome back to The Drive. We are looking at How to Be a Man 101. Yeah. And it's a lot harder than we thought. Because we got to imitate Christ, the perfect man.
Yep.
But our worldly desires get in the way, and our flesh gets in the way, and then all the worldly influences that build up the flesh get in the way. And then we start thinking to ourselves, I could tell it was me by the tone of my voice, I should do that, and we should not, So when we look at this in application, how do we avoid the worldly idea of masculinity? And again, they keep using this phrase, toxic masculinity, which, you could say I'm a toxic man by the standpoint of what the secular world is saying, because they want me to be manly on the ball field, manly in the bedroom, and manly in the billfold, the 3 Bs that Vodi Bakum puts forward for us, which is, I think, a great analogy, alliteration and whatnot in there. But that's what the world wants men to be, okay? But if you're anything other than that, you get labeled toxic. And a lot of times Christian men are the ones being labeled toxic.
Yeah.
So how do we live for Christ in application to imitate Christ? Well, the first thing is to reject the counterfeit masculinity.
Yeah.
And the counterfeit masculinity, or what we would call toxic masculinity, not the world, but what we would call it, is counterfeit. It's fake. It's what the world wants us to be, and we have to reject what the world says a man is and defines a man as, and we have to look at it biblically through the lens of the Bible, which we looked at in great detail today already, and that is to emulate Christ.
Right.
So I have to then look at what Jesus was, and there'll be more on this in the article that we're going to post. But God's example to us, another alliteration piece here for you, 4 Ps. Jesus was the provider. He was a protector.
Right.
He was a pastor and a priest.
Yep.
As a man in our own lives, we have to be a provider, meet the needs of the household, okay?
Yep.
Number 1, if you fail to provide for the needs of the household, you are in sin. That is in 1 Timothy. Go dig into it. It's fantastic. You have to be a protector. You have to place yourself between your family and all that would do them harm. Even emotionally, you have to set an emotional boundary sometimes for things that are going to get in the way and start tearing down the family dynamic.
Right.
Okay? You are, as a man, the pastor of your household.
Correct.
Okay? Which means you represent God to your family. How well are you living that? Okay?
Yeah, good question.
Are you living the representation of Christ to your family? Okay. Another one here is the priest. You represent your family to God. And those are 2 very different things.
Yes, they are.
That's why, we just celebrated Reformation Day, and one of the big distinctions between a warrior or between a priest and a pastor. A pastor represents God to the people. A priest represents the people to God. Well, Jesus is the last priest. We now have no need for anybody to intercede on our behalf other than Christ.
Exactly. And all those things, all those 4 Ps, they are your responsibility if you're a masculine man.
Correct. They are your responsibility.
So you're going to assume the responsibility or not.
Yeah. And that goes back to Genesis, number 2, fulfill the foundational mandate. The mandate, the mandate of men, was very good at the very beginning of Genesis.
Yeah.
God looked at everything and said, this was very good. Well, when did he say that? When he had created man and said, this is very good. And again, it ties us back to tend, to work, to serve, to cultivate, to make productive. So if you're not being productive in your life, you are failing the mandate. Okay. Also to keep, to engage in the activities of guarding and protecting and watching over. So if you're not guarding, protecting, and watching over what God has commanded you to, then you're failing your biblical mandate.
Correct.
So how do we apply that? Is that, again, in our family dynamic, we must be productive. We must safeguard our families and protect our wives. Okay?
Absolutely.
And ladies, if you're listening, these are the things that you should be looking for in a man.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
Number 3 here is to emulate Christ. And this, again, we talked about in great detail, is glorifying Christ. Okay? But we emulate Christ in all things. And again, it's not about toxic aggression and being overbearing. That's what the world thinks a man is.
Right.
But for us, it means that we are tending, keeping, and we are watching over in humility, that we are leading with strength, self-control, and love, which is sacrificial.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
You're called to watch and stand fast in the faith. Be brave, be strong. Those are the things that we see in what biblical masculinity is.
Right.
And it's strength with love, compassion, and care. So what should we model then is sacrifice over dominance. Okay?
Yes.
We should model service over status. Okay? And we should have self-control over aggression.
Right.
And service over status, that speaks to the idea of masking. I'm going to mask with all my swagger, whatever it is. I got the right clothing. I got the right look. I got the right, I think the kids call it aesthetic today,
Something like that, I'm sure, yeah.
You've got the right aesthetic. That's your status.
Yeah.
But instead of status, title, rank, or aesthetic, we should be modeling service. We should be rejecting the world's status-seeking concepts and emulate the Son of God, who came not to serve, but to be. Not to be served, but to serve.
Right. Yeah. So, I don't see how I could do any more on application of this, to be honest with you, because I think the context of all that we've looked at so far, and there shouldn't be any doubt as what it takes to be a man.
Right.
Especially with respect to, what was the name you gave it? Masculinity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, Christ serves as our example. He serves as our guidepost, no matter what the world has to say about it. And quite frankly, I think if you're a godly man, you don't care what the world thinks about it.
Right.
Because the world is nothing.
Right.
To be honest with you.
Yep. When you leave this world, you're not taking your status with you.
That's right. That's right. So I think for the final thought for the day here then, as we conclude with this, it comes from John chapter 15, verses 5 through 8. And it reads, I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, bears much fruit. For without me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered. And they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire, and it should be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so you will be my disciples. So here we have the mandate about being a masculine man, a godly man, and one who follows Christ.
And it comes down to the decision.
Sure does.
Have you decided this day,
Yes.
as Joshua would say, to serve the Lord?
And will you assume the responsibility?
Will you assume responsibility? Yeah. Well, that's what we have for you guys today on The Drive. Hope you got something out of this. And ladies, don't tune out, because these are the things that you should be looking for in a man. Yeah. Have a blessed day. We'll see you guys next week right here on The Drive.
Amen.
Thank you for tuning in to Christian Fellowship in Los Lunas, New Mexico. Join us Sundays at 10 a.m. and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. as we preach through the Bible, line by line.